One of the things that I'm constantly thinking about nowadays with the economy is that in a lot of ways the West has followed the former Soviet Union in Eastern Europe. Recently, when I was talking to some family members, two things I heard. Somebody who has a very, very successful, good business said he couldn't get loans to expand his business even though he's hiring. Another young person that I knew who, young adult who has a very solid business, very saving, has money stashed aside, wants to start investing in property from the ground up. Talks about really good mortgages out there. Can't get a mortgage even though he has lots of money to put aside and has been paying another mortgage off. Reminds me of in the Soviet Union, the situation that it maybe cost $20 to get a TV, but who could find a TV? Nowadays, you can get 3.5% interest on a loan, but who can get a loan, right? The economy has become centralized, totally controlled by central authorities in the city of London and New York, running it for their own, and the system is in a collapse. I think more and more people are now starting to accept this, that the United States is the financial banking system, looks like the Soviet Union, acts like the Soviet Union, and is going the way of the Soviet Union. This is reality. If you've got an argument with this, don't waste my time. Just, you've been wrong over and over again. Anyone who's going to sit there and say, oh, it's going to pull itself up and it's going to reform and it's workable, you've been wrong so many times. Now we're on the sovereign debt crisis, which turns out that the banks wanted to invest in a safe thing, euro, but they wanted a slightly better interest. So it sounds kind of like the subprimes, huh? The banks had invested in the internet, that didn't work out, so then they decided to invest in property, but subprime property had a slightly better interest rate for them, even though it wasn't stable. Well, then they got burned by property. Then they started investing in sovereigns, which they talk about all the time. And so they wanted to invest in euro sovereign because it was secure, but they got better interest rates in Spain and Italy and Greece, but even particularly in Italy or Greece, who had, utterly fucked up economic and political systems, they got slightly better. So now it seems like they're heavily loaded into that. Sound familiar? Okay. So, one of the things a lot of people point out to, and I want to correct this, because this is going to get even more depressing, is that when the Soviet Union fell, everybody had something to look at, like, well, what's coming after the Soviet Union? And people said, well, people in East Germany or Poland would look to Germany or England or France or the United States and say something like that. So people in the USSR could say, we could become a United States. People in Poland could say, we could become a Germany. Okay? So that was the ideal, that in the place of centralized Soviet planning, what you would get is a parliamentary free enterprise system. Okay? Now what you're getting is people saying, well, we can't imagine. They're claiming we can't imagine. There is no alternative. It's capitalism and democracy. What's the alternative? Wake up, people. There is an alternative out there already waiting to take the place. It's China, okay? Capitalism with authoritarian government. That is what already the United States is moving towards, okay? You can mash up Tiananmen Square and some of these recent Occupy images, and even though Tiananmen Square is more ruthless, the concept of youth opposition being crushed, the state establishing its authoritarian rule, the solution is already there. The kind of fascism, well, I wouldn't call it a solution, the next phase, where we fall from. If we just collapse, where do we go? The Soviet Union just collapsed. It fell into Wild West capitalism. What we should have realized is we thought that the Soviet Union would naturally evolve into a U.S. system, and it didn't. It went to the system of the third world, the things we call BRICS, which is really kind of, free market fascism, where a party dominates a country, minorities, most people are just subservient, there's mass inequality, and the game is completely fixed to benefit a few. That is likely where this system might collapse into. Okay? A lot of people, some people in the Occupy or some of the libertarians or Tea Party people talking about, a more free market or more capitalist system. Where we actually are looking, where say a Bloomberg in New York is driving this, is going to be more down the China road of reducing the government down literally into just an ideological token. Okay, just like the communism and the communist state is just an ideological token. In the United States, the president, Congress, all of that, the Supreme Court, the Constitution, all of this is just a symbolic play around the small Politburo of people who run the country and who tolerate no dissent. Okay, you wake up. Okay, I mean, if we don't think of an alternative, we just let the system evolve as it's going, it's already shown that it's utterly unstable. That basically there's a few people who have so much money or are so desperate to make big returns that they just can't help themselves because of the incentives, because of their ability to pull a little money out of, well, hundreds of millions out of it for themselves. They're going to keep raising the level of systemic risk over and over again. There's no way to stop it. Okay, and there's also, as clearly from what's been happening with the Occupy, is that these people have enough control of the media and of politicians that they are going to fight tooth and nail to even prevent discussions of the situation. Okay, I mean, they're going to generate things like the Tea Party, which really are the brown shirt party. I'm not saying that people who are in the Tea Party, but people in the Tea Party have been deluded. The Tea Party was generated after the bankers got their bailout. They didn't want a bailout to go to the private sector. So, all of a sudden, these people saying no, moral hazard and stuff like that. That was to prevent government bailout from bailing out the overall economy and helping people. It was to ensure that the people who got their bailout kept their bailout, but that there was no extension of it. I mean, really, the Tea Party is defending the status quo of socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor, and they talked about no more bailouts, but there's a bailout coming right now in Europe. I don't see any Tea Party. I mean, they're old, they don't like to go cold, but I don't see any Tea Party going to. Do you see any Tea Party going out saying, well, we can't bail out the sovereigns? I don't see it going on. I mean, they're doing what they're told. The banks have a lot of money exposed. They want to get a big bailout. They're excited about getting a bailout from Germany. They're not going to complain. And they tell the puppets what to do. It's socialism is it's another bailout. No, it's not a bailout. It's central banks propping up this system. Okay, it's not a bailout. It's central banks taking taxpayers' money, giving it to private banks, but it's not a bailout. Okay, and the Tea Party's not going to, it's just a buzz movement. I mean, I'm sure most of the people who join it, well, a lot of them seem kind of nuts to me, but I mean, a number of people probably believe in the free market system and stuff like that. But, a lot of people in the Soviet Union believed in communism as well. And when communism started falling, they were saying, we need to be more properly communist. Well, we're seeing the same thing. This sort of system we have is collapsing. The thing that I think, and I think the Occupy movement is the only place it's going to come from right now, because it's the only place where a group of people can get together, talk, and then suddenly some of the media will actually listen to them, is to try to come up with some proposals that maybe can salvage the concept of progressive reform. Because this is the only thing that's going to save the whole concept of parliamentary congressional democracy. Representational democracy is utterly dependent on this, and we maybe have 5 or 10 years. If we don't get that, what we're going to get is a China-like system. It's a system that's in Vietnam, it's in Indonesia. This is the system of the BRICS. This is the new economic system, is capitalism with authoritarian regimes like Singapore, which decide all the outcomes beforehand. Okay? So it's stable, but it's completely authoritarian. It's not really capitalism, it's consumerism, and there's no democracy whatsoever. It's not the kind of liberal system that Westerners envisioned. It's the system that we've allowed built become dependent on in China, and it's what's coming if we don't figure out a way to rebalance not only the distribution of wealth in the West, but also the redistribution of power between government, elected government, and banks. The thing is that you look at a Bloomberg, right, Michael Bloomberg, I mean, he is definitely, he is head forward to the China model. You see, that's where he wants to go. That's where he wants to take it. I mean, New York is, He wants New York to be like Singapore. Okay? So, if we'll see what happens.